afternoon, everyone. My name is Megan, and with me today I have Chris, and we're here to talk to you about proven fraud prevention strategies for your company.
Yeah, I look forward to it. So yeah, we really have never done anything like this here before at Summit. We've done a lot of sessions about a lot of things, but a piece of feedback that we get from you is that we really want to learn what we can do to eliminate some of the theft and fraud that happens. We know you guys are losing a lot of money. A lot of that's internal to fraud, to theft. So not only did we decide to throw it in as a topic today, but we also got a lot of our material from you. We canvassed a lot of clients and said, hey, you know, what are the top 3 or 4 things that you run into every year with fraud? How much money have you lost? Tell us your horror stories. And a lot of the material that we got came from you. So as always, going forward, we always invite you to let us know what you're running into. Your feedback is what drives content like this. So hopefully this will be informative. Like most sessions, this could probably go 2 hours, but we only have one, so we're going to try and get through as much as we can. There is going to be a handout. It doesn't look like you have that yet, so it'll be in the back. Pick that up. It's going to bullet point everything we talk about, and as always, if you have any questions afterwards, please ask away or come find us back in the in-store experience and we'll chat. So I think one of the first things I want to do is share a number with you. To me, was a little bit staggering, and that's 9.6 to 14.8, and that's $1 billion that are lost in the retail industry each year to theft and fraud. And in fact, the number actually skews to the high side of the 14. So everyone in this room is clearly a part of that. It's a serious problem. I don't want to stand up here and make it seem like everyone in your organization is potentially a criminal, but from our seat, you have to almost think that way in order to not only detect fraud, but also to prevent it. I think it makes the most sense quickly to kind of set the stage for some of the research that we've done, and that's around what we call the fraud triangle. It's in many industries, not just retail, but it involves 3 main areas. The first one is motivation. So we know that someone's not going to commit theft or fraud unless they're motivated. That might be because they have financial problems. Unfortunately, it could be drugs, it could be gambling, it could be whatever forces them to feel like they have to cheat you, to cheat the system, to steal. Maybe it's because their performance is gauged too heavily. Maybe they feel stressed about their targets or their goals. All of that could be motivation to steal from you. Number 2 is rationalization, and that's just me understanding that, hey, I can rationalize what I'm about to take from you because you owe me. You don't pay me well enough. You know, I'll pay it back later. I have to have it now. For whatever reason, I can rationalize it, and that's really all that matters. And the third area, probably the most important for you guys, and at least for us from an RQ perspective, is opportunity. And that's understanding that there's some kind of weakness in your controls, there's some management that's indifferent, or along the way somehow you guys aren't reconciling or following up as you should, and it's leaving that fraud hole open. And that's a lot of what we're going to talk about today within RQ. So last year, of all the retail fraud, I want to talk a little bit about how the retail fraud was discovered. 26.3% was reported by someone internally within your organization. 18% was found just by accident. Another 18% was done because you did an internal audit. And then finally, 15% was found because of an internal control that was implemented one way or another. The other interesting stat is that of all theft, 37% was actually committed by management. So we have to keep that in mind as we go forward today as well. So areas of opportunity, we talked about motivation, rationalization, and opportunity. Some of those areas of opportunity that we found that you guys may leave open, weak internal controls, separation of duties. We'll talk a lot about this one. We want to make sure you're not having the same one particular person carry out any task in RQ that really should involve 3, 4, 5 different people, 3 or 4 steps. Inventory counts being a great example, which we'll get to later. We don't want to have the same person counting, submitting, recounting, adjusting. That needs to be divided up. Just by doing a simple separation of duties, we see that fraud risk drop. And then finally, indifferent management. All of the above do you guys no good unless you have buy-in from your management team and they're not just blasé about the whole thing. Megan?
So let's start at the beginning with complex passwords and timed password reset. So less than 1% of our current RQ users are using complex passwords. So complex passwords were created in response to the growing needs for PCI compliance. So you can still choose to use simple passwords, but you're all going to go home and use complex passwords now because you can actually make those passwords that much more stronger based on uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and characters. And you should always set a minimum of at least 6 characters. And this is also the screen where you're going to do that forced password reset after so many days. 30 is a really good standard, and that's just going to make sure that your employees are continually changing those passwords, so I can't tell Chris mine and he can't remember it next week. I'm sure lots of you have store managers and sales reps who use the same computers, so you want to make sure that you don't have that security open for one sales rep to go into under a manager if you've got easy passwords. Another place you can actually do this is once you have new employees, or since you go home now and set up your complex passwords, you're going to want to require that password reset in your employee's profile for when you go home. So next is the lock screen and timeout. I'm sure that everyone here has had an issue where one employee was logged in under the other employee's name. Now you've got to go and fix those commissions. It takes time, it takes energy, and you just want to make sure that it doesn't happen anymore. So what you want to use is the lock screen. So what this is going to essentially do is after an employee has done their sale, after a certain amount of idle time that you set up, RQ4 will then lock and they'll have to then be forced to enter in their credentials, which is great for a store manager and a sales rep to be on the same computer, because like I said, now I don't have access to Chris's information to change security settings, to change my commissions. We wouldn't need manager override codes if everyone got to have the same security access. You should also train your employees that after they're done a sale to Control L, and then it'll actually give them this lovely lock screen. So to set it up, you simply go into your workstation settings. At the very bottom, you're going to set up your lock screen idle time. 2 minutes is a good standard practice, but you can always go under that. Also, where you set it up is, since everyone already has role management set up because you set that up for multiple other areas in RQ, you can actually set it up per role, which is good if you want your sales reps and your store managers to have a different amount of time before that RQ is going to lock.
Awesome, thanks Megan. So another huge announcement a few months back, which you probably saw yesterday if you were at the product announcement session, is a piece that we implemented really just, again, based on your feedback, and that's transaction authentication. You guys asked us, hey, we really want to be able to, with more than just a tendered invoice, be able to require credentials. We need to see a username and a password so we can truly verify the person who's doing the transaction in RQ truly is who they say they are. We've introduced transaction authentication. So instead of just an invoice, now you have the ability to set this up for a number of different transactions, all the way from bill pays to petty cash, of course sales, and then even inventory. So purchase orders, receiving them, same thing with transfers. And the setting is going to be found under POS Defaults in transaction authentication. You decide what it's going to be turned on for and what it's not. The idea works much like it would for authenticating myself as I do a sale, again, except it's going to be for different transactions. So a sales rep would go through the motions of doing the normal sale. They would get to the checkout screen, they would go to tender, and they would see a prompt that looks just like this. All they have to do is enter a username and password. RQ is going to verify that it is truly who they are. You guys are going to have reporting behind the scenes that will show you exactly who was responsible for the transaction, even if it wasn't the original person who was logged into RQ. So great new level of security, great for reporting. Hopefully going to be something that can aid you right away today, if you're not using it already, with fraud prevention.
So in keeping with the theme of employees authenticating themselves, I want to touch next on biometrics, or better known as fingerprint scanners. So what's really great about fingerprint scanners is you can use them for logging into RQ4 from that lock screen, you can use it for punching in, or you can use it for that new transaction authentication piece Chris just talked about. They're really very easy. You simply get the fingerprint scanner, plug it into RQ, download the drivers, and now your employees are going to scan in 2 fingerprints per hand, and you're good to go. But what I really want to talk about is how biometrics can help you with employee time theft, or better known as buddy punching. And not all employees understand that buddy punching is a bad thing. Let's take Chris and I, for example. Chris is running late for work. I'm a new employee. He texts me and says, Megan, can you help me out? I'm running late. Can you punch me in? And I say, sure, why not? I got to help my buddy out. I'm a brand new employee. So I punch him in. Now you've paid Chris for how many minutes for being late? Because I know his password, because I don't have complex password setups, or he tells me, or I don't have fingerprint scanners. So the American Payroll Association has showed that employee time theft exceeds 10 minutes per day per employee. So let's put that into a real life example. I have a store with 5 employees in it. At 10 minutes per day, I'm looking at 250 minutes of overpay per week. If I'm paying my employees $10 per hour, that's $40 a week in overpay. That's just over $2,000 per year, and that's for one location. How many of you in the room have more than one location? Simple, fast, easy.
Excellent. And just to kind of follow that up, the other piece with the finger scan is it's great for preventing buddy punching, but it's also just the ease of use to be able to log in and log out. A lot of the feedback that we've gotten from our project retail stores, even specifically, is that, hey, before, it just makes the in and out of the store, especially if you're in a rush, that much more easy. A lot of the excuses that came from forgetting are gone. So definitely something to consider. The hardware itself is inexpensive. The return on investment that we found is great, so it's certainly something you guys would probably want to consider if you haven't done so already. Kind of switch gears a little bit and actually talk about some physical theft and physical fraud, and that deals with boxes being tampered with. I recently spoke with a dealer out on the West Coast who had a huge problem with inventory in the back room being tampered with. Right off the top, he wasn't sure if it was just being opened and unfortunately stolen. Were they tampering with prices? Was it an employee working in conjunction with a customer to steal? But the idea is he knew his boxes were being tampered with, and he really had to find a way to prevent it. So an outside-the-box idea, which I'm not in your stores every day, and it came to me as an ingenious, inexpensive way to fix this exact problem, and that's tamper-proof tape. He had several different kinds of tamper-proof tape that he would rotate through weekly, monthly. Some would do imprints, just like you see here. Some would leave watermarks. Some would do overlay for cut tape. Bottom line is, it was for what it's used for, super simple, super easy, and inexpensive. It took away the tampering problem, and he shared that with me, and I thought it was worth sharing it with you. If you have this problem, or even if you don't, maybe prevent it before it ever starts. Sticking with the idea of the back room, the warehouse, the boxes, transfers, shipping, you guys, especially with more than a handful of stores, you don't have time to pay super close attention to what's happening outside your store when it comes to shipping. Shipping fraud, extremely fast growing. We see that from the 9 to 14 billion. That's going to be a large portion of that. Electronics, specifically the iPads, the iPhones, the high dollar devices you guys are selling, that's the target. And that's just external. The other piece of that is what could happen internally if you're not staying very on top of what's happening with shipping expenses. So unauthorized shipping expenses can probably be one of the first things you guys see as a red flag when it comes to internal fraud around the whole idea of shipping. Several stories where you guys have had managers or sales reps. Someone has had control over the company's credit card. They've had control over UPS or FedEx account numbers. And all it takes is a little bit of work to start using both of those powerful financial tools to not only maybe steal products from you, but also charge them to you on your behalf to ship them. So the first thing we'll mention, and this has been what's actually caught that, and that's first, making sure that you link your shipping expense account to your GL at minimum. And then obviously monitoring that expense account. You would know, hopefully you would know right away, or at least your accounting team would know right away, any red flags that would pop up in this report. The GL activity report, whether it's run daily, multiple times per day, weekly, watch this part, especially when it comes to the shipping expense. Great way to red flag and then prevent any potential shipping fraud.
So now I want to tell you the tale of 1% and 99% for commissions. So let's start off looking at Chris and Nick. Chris needs to meet his KPI targets for the month, and he's a little bit short, and he's wanting that extra bonus. Nick's already met his, but he's buying the next PS4 next week, and he really wants that extra money in his pocket. And at their company, they allow them to split commissions, which most of our clients do. So they get together, and they're going to decide that Chris is going to be the first sales rep, and he will then get the target for his KPI, and Nick's going to get 99% of the commission, and he's going to get that extra money in his pocket. So we've seen it happen all the time. It's not bad to split commissions. The issue is you need to make sure you're watching for this fraud hole that employees can sometimes go to. So now you're thinking, well, I do allow split commission, so what do I do? You simply look at your commission details report, and all you look for is split commissions where they're 1% and 99%. A fast, effective way to just monitor to see if your employees are doing that. And then you can approach them and have that coaching opportunity, or maybe even just turning off split commissions is the best way to do it if it's going to become a big problem.
Awesome, great point. That's something that, again, if you're not on top of it, it could happen for even 1, 2, 3 weeks, and before you know it, the damage would have already been done. Speaking of damage already being done, and that's our next topic, and that's return or refund fraud. Again, annual losses here estimated well over 10 billion. From that 9 to 14, along with shipping, this is another big one. And for you guys, this is probably the #1 fraud, theft related piece we're going to see and we're going to run into. One of the biggest pieces around returns and refunds that can be a fraud hole today for all of you is the quick sale. Again, if you were here an hour ago, you heard me say we like to talk about some things over and over again just because we really want to drive home the point because it's that valuable to you, quick sale being one of those. We do know some states, some regions would require that you use or leave quick sale turned on. So for you, it's a little bit different, but in most cases, the quick sale piece is just a way to get a customer in and out without collecting a first name or last name. We have no information. It's truly labeled as a quick sale. So quick sales since the last summit, 3.7 million, so that number's gotten a little bit better, but it's still up there. So that means some of you still have this turned on and your sales reps are still using it. The bottom line is, without a first name and a last name, we have no way to know who the customer is, clearly. So if and when that quick sale gets returned internally, we have no way to track that back to a customer. We do use today, we have the ability for you guys to use hardware collections. You're missing out on that opportunity. There's a lot of revenue that can be lost by not having customer information. Marketing. Specifically at a fraud, as a sales rep gets his hands on a quick sale, if I return that, there's really no good way to track that, and it just leaves the door open for fraud. So again, the big piece is returning it. Once it's refunded, that's going to be the fraud hole. I want to talk about making sure you at least consider blocking it. How do we block the quick sale? Before we talk about the full block, I want to give one recommendation, and that's at least, at minimum, to prompt your customers for first name and last name. So that's done under POS Defaults. In the sales section up at the very top, you'll see quick sale rules, and that's prompt the user to pick a customer when the quick sale function gets launched. So if you still have to have that turned on, at least consider using this checkbox. Now that won't require first name and last name, but it will at least prompt for it. What we would prefer to see you do is to block the quick sale altogether. So if you go into your security screen setup, you're going to select the console sales security screen, and then you'll see the option here to allow access without a quick sale. So that's taking away the entire box, no more quick sale. So hopefully not, but I bet many of you are thinking, oh no, do I allow quick sale? And if I do, have they been returned, which is where the real problem is. How do you find out if you're A, allowing quick sales, and B, if they've been returned? We want to look at the refund summary report with a very quick filter, which I've actually already applied in this screenshot, is to use your customer field and do filter by quick. That's going to do two things. It's going to show you any quick sale that's been returned. It's also going to show you a customer that your sales reps have created, first name quick, last name sale. That's sometimes the workaround for taking away the quick sale button Either way, the return fraud hole is there if quick sales can be returned. So a couple things that need to happen after you've filtered for quick. You want to make sure it's not happening at multiple stores. You want to make sure it's not being done by a sales rep on multiple occasions per week, per month. So refund summary report, filter and use quick. Great way to keep your eyes on that. It's a big problem. You guys have told us it is. Block the quick sale.
So in keeping with the theme of refunds, we want to next look at the importance of setting up your refund codes in RQ. Really easy setup. Just simply where you would set up your discount codes, you set up your refund codes. And you want to make sure that they're really clear and concise, because you want to know who is doing the refunds, what's being refunded, and why it is. So an example like this one is not really that great. I'm a new employee, just didn't like other. So many times we see clients use miscellaneous and it gets abused over and over because it's just easy to just choose miscellaneous. So what you really want to do is have clear and concise. Buyer's remorse. It's a defective product. It's dead on arrival. You're doing a price match. Or you probably still need to have that POS employee error because sometimes things are mistakes and you need to do the refund. So you really want to make sure that you're going to be able to track why things are being refunded. So you look again at the refund summary report that Chris just talked about, but what you're going to do this time is look for the refund codes. What's being tracked? This is going to show you why it's being refunded. What was the issue? And then you're going to actually look at the product detail report. And what you can do with this report is really neat, is look at your customization tools, and you're going to sort by tendered by, and you're actually going to look at the quantity column next to the unit column and search for below 1. And that's going to show you all the refunds. And it's going to actually show you who did the refunds and what they were refunding. Is the same employee constantly refunding? That's going to next bring you to ask, are they refunding to cash? Why are they refunding constantly? Is there making mistakes? Is there a coaching opportunity? And what products are being refunded? Is it continually the same products? Maybe I need to get them off my shelf, or maybe that's another red flag that I need to address. So refund some product detail report, tendered by, and look for the quantity of less than 1. So next, let's look at the refund override required after X amount of days. So what this function does is it actually allows you to set up where you can set how many days refund after we've hit that days mark that your employees will now require a manager override. A lot of carriers I've seen use this if you've got a 14 to 30 day refund policy, and this just helps that extra step to make sure the employees aren't forgetting that they've passed that 14 day and you can't refund that phone. The issue is, with the fraud hole that we've seen, is when people set up a 30-day refund policy. Makes sense, your company is a 30-day refund policy, so you set it up. The issue is with high phone sales, employees can then look at the product detail report and see when those phones are on their 29th day. And then they will refund them to cash, pocket the money, and walk out the door. And when the customer comes in tomorrow on the 30th day, they just say, sorry, you missed a day. And it happens. Clients have told us this story. It's not just something that may happen. It actually does happen. So a way that a client helped this was they actually set up a 0 days refund, which is actually able to come about in 411. You're actually now able to set up the refund required after 0 days. And that just means the minute that product is refunded, they're going to need to have a manager override code put in, and then you can then track those override codes and figure out, are your managers then refunding too much, or what's the issue there? And so this was actually for their iPhone 5 cases, because we all know there's huge fraud in that right now. But the biggest thing is that I've heard is you can't forget about your high-end accessories. There's expensive accessories as well, and the same thing can happen easy enough, and they're not serialized, so they're easier to move through your company. So don't forget, when you go home and set up your refund override, you're also going to set it up for your high-end accessories.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so let's keep talking about accessories, and let's talk about another area of returns, and that's what 68% of you are using today, and that's non-sellable products. How many of you return items to non-sellable? So that's great. However, the problem is that even though 68% of you use the function, 55% of you don't count that inventory. So you've got products that are coming back in. They're coming back in under a non-sellable status, which is fine, but they're not being counted. That's an absolute huge fraud hole. If you're able to have a non-sellable product, you have to count it. If it's sitting in a back room somewhere, doesn't matter where, if it's sitting anywhere and it's not being counted, your sales reps know that. They know that it's not showing up in any type of reconciliation. And if I decide that I want to put one into my purse or my pocket every day, once a week, who knows how long it's going to take before you guys catch on if it's not being counted. So hopefully no one in this room applies to that stat. You have to count it. It's super simple to count. All we have to do is, on the new count sheet, make sure that you are including the red circle there, non-sellable. Switching gears from returns just a little bit, I want to talk about cash, specifically high cash. We know high cash, cash in general is not nearly as popular as it was. And 99% of the time when I talk to you guys, when we see extremely high cash transactions, not only does it make you guys nervous, but it also has likely implications of fraud. The folks that are going to come in and buy the 3 or do the 3 iPhone activation, they're going to spend cash. They have no intention of keeping that activation. They're going to cancel right away. They've got 3 iPhones. They're going on eBay or Craigslist, and we see that all the time. The biggest question I get is, well, that's great. Yeah, Chris, we know that's a problem, but how can I stop it and how can I find out? So we came up with a quasi-report that we call the High Cash Sales Report. At least we customize it that way. It's not really called that. It's your sales by invoice report. And all I've done is done a very quick filter and group. Show me the cash column for any cash transaction greater than $200, and then group by the salesperson or the sold by. So what this will do is give you a red flag report to quickly identify any person who has done at least one, but in most cases, multiple high cash transactions. There's a good chance they're up to something. At minimum, they need to understand that if a customer is asking to pay with cash, specifically high cash, take a second look, speak with management. Of the probably 10 scenarios we talk about daily fraud related, this is probably guaranteed top 10.
So in keeping with the theme of money, I want to next look at the payment method setup where you can limit a dollar amount. So what this is a feature which not a lot of clients use, where you can actually set up a maximum amount of cash that can be refunded. So that's really going to help to make sure that those high cash sales aren't happening. Because I have clients who have a corporate office and their maximum amount of refunding cash is $100. Anything above that $100 needs a check issued from corporate office. And that way you don't have to worry about those high cash refunds, but also your employees don't have to have that large amount of cash in their drawers, and then they don't have to worry about getting robbed and it going missing, and maybe it falls out of the drawer into pockets, etc. But what you also need to do though is you need to then allow the full amount same day refunds, because if the employee does make a mistake and then they need to refund to cash, they need to have this option that same day, or then they're going to have to be phoning the manager. That's going to be a bad customer experience to be like, actually I can't refund it even though I just made a mistake. So just make sure you have that set up as well. Next is a new feature that came with 4.14, and it's actually to a restriction now to not allow to give cash back to customers on credit cards. So there were issues that employees were able to give cash back, whether a customer was using a debit or a credit card. So now there's actually a restriction that when they try to exceed the amount, they'll get this pop-up that lets them know that they can't do that, and you don't have to worry about then that cash going out of your stores. Which if you have a limit on what you can refund, you're not even going to have the cash in the drawers, then you're leaving your employees out money when they actually need to deal with it for customers. Really simple setup. As long as you have payment integration and you have one of the verifications set up in there, this will automatically then prompt them if they do happen to go and try to give cash back. So one of the last things I want to touch on is something in POS Defaults I think gets overlooked a lot, and it's under the payment type there, is the things at the bottom we're going to actually look, where it is such things as require address verification. So if you have payment integration, you're going to actually, this is going to help with those credit card frauds that a customer comes in. And we actually had a client who had a customer come in, had a credit card, they verified the credit card was right, they verified that it was up to date, but it actually was a stolen credit card. So such things as the require verification access, or if you look at the top, there's no CVV2 match. You can go through the whole list, definitely with your CSM, but just extra ways to help with credit card fraud. The biggest one at the bottom I want to look at is the phone authorization and the set manual. So what happens is you should at least be setting to allow with a manager override, if not, do not allow. And the story is that a customer had a phone authorization from the credit card company that you need your 4 digits to be sure that it was the correct credit card, but it was stolen. So now that customer walked out with 3 iPhones, accessories for all of them, and they've now lost all that money because it wasn't actually the proper credit card. So you want to make sure that for sure it's at least with manager override so that you've got that extra set of information and verification, or not allow at all. And then you just have to, if the credit card doesn't work, unfortunately, you need to look at a different type of payment.
Excellent. Great tips, Megan. So speaking of payment types, let's talk about what's happening at the end of the day. After a long day of selling and a long day of taking credit cards, hopefully not high cash, let's talk about the cash out. I like to talk a lot about a very important, dear to my heart piece of inventory, and that's the blind inventory count. I don't spend enough time talking about the same functionality on the cash out side, and that's the blind cash out. Today, only 12% of our users are using a blind cash out. I don't need to see a show of hands. I'm interested though, how many of you don't have this turned on? The idea being, as a sales rep, I'm cashing out for the day. There is mysteriously a $200 overage in my drawer. I can see that. I can see exactly what the system expects me to count, but because I'm an honest employee, I'm going to make a note of that, reconcile it, talk to my manager. We know that no sales rep would ever say, all right, our queue expects $200 over. I can see that the drawer only has whatever it truly has. To make things right, I'll just take that $200, stick it into my pocket, and head out for the weekend. We know no one would do that. The reality is it's happening. If I can see the variance, if I know exactly what the system is expecting me to count, if there's an overage, hopefully it's not, but the decision could be an easy one for a fraudulent employee. The idea is blind cash outs. You take away that variance, you don't show it. It's a matter of I go and do the count, I submit the count. What you can also do with a blind count in place is add a variance limit or buffer. You can say, hey, if the variance for this cash out is more than $25, $50, $100, you have to require comments. A manager has to get involved. However, if that variance stays below the buffer, no problems. The employee can go ahead and submit the count and move on as normal. So in your security settings, you want to check out the cash out screen. You want to consider using blind cash outs. Only 12% of you are doing it. It's worth a look. It's a huge fraud hole. It's top 10. Check that out. Another idea, which is truly probably one of the most unrecognized fraud holes out there that I run into at least, and that's the manual addition of a couple different SKUs on RQ4. Two different types. One is phone activation wizard SKU, and the second are promotion SKUs. I can almost guarantee everyone in the room is using both, if not guaranteed the first of these type products. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be vendor rebate SKUs. They're tracking a commission for your company, and they should only be used if and when we're activating a device or going through the phone activation wizard. However, there's a very simple setting. If left unchecked, if left checked, the sales rep truly has the ability to open an invoice, add these SKUs manually, assuming they're being paid a commission on an activation SKU or a commission on a price sheet promotion SKU. You're now paying them for selling a vendor rebate SKU with no device, with no accessory. They're truly just ringing out an invoice. It's hard to reconcile for that. It's hard to see it until it's too late. It's a huge fraud hole. You want to prevent that by doing 3 quick things. You want to go into your POS defaults. You want to find on the sales option at the very bottom these sales invoice rules. Double check these. You want to make sure that allow manual addition of phone activation wizard SKUs, as well as the allow manual addition of promotion SKUs are both unchecked. That means the only way those SKUs can be added to an invoice is if, in fact, the rep goes through the wizard the right way, the fraud hole gets removed, you guys sleep better at night. The idea would be from a rep's perspective, if I try and do that, maybe they've gotten used to it because you allow it, they would see a prompt that looks just like this. It would let them know that manually adding that SKU to this invoice is not possible. They would have to go through the phone activation wizard. So it's a 35-second fix for a huge problem.
Great. So I want to switch gears again and talk about ePINs or real-time replenishment cards. And I know not everybody uses them, but we have seen multiple clients that have had fraud issues with this, so we really wanted to make sure we brought it up for anybody in the room who does use them. So the issue is that if you do still use ePINs or prepaid cards or RTRs aren't available for you, it's going to print the ePIN on the customer's invoice, which is great because then they can go put it on their phone and then have the minutes on their phone. The issue is that employees know if the securities aren't set right, that they can then go back into that customer's profile, reprint the invoice, and they've now got this PIN, and they can put it on their card, or I can phone up Chris and say, hey, you need minutes? I've got you covered. So what you want to make sure you do is go to the POS reprint phone card and just simply set it to no access. It's really easy, and it just helps make sure that the employees don't have access to do that. Or if you are able to use RTRs, simply then this is going to help close that completely because the minutes are going to go directly onto that customer's phone. You don't have to even worry about the PIN ever printing on the invoice.
Awesome. We've talked a lot today about the simple checkboxes, the settings, the POS defaults. I think a lot of us, even myself included, you overlook those a lot. I just want to throw this up just for one last tidbit. POS defaults, sales again, refunds. All of these are important, but the one I want to specifically point out is making sure that we enforce credit card returns to the original card used. You'd be surprised how many of you overlook that when we talk to you. You don't check that box, huge fraud hole. There's some other additions here. We won't go through each of these, but I would recommend you take a look. It's, again, a 25-second piece to go in and browse these defaults. With the new channel function, we can restrict refunds to the same district, region, location, so you can gain some additional control around return and refund fraud there. But I think the general idea is these small checkboxes could be the difference between you guys losing thousands of dollars a month or not. So take the time to look through them. If it's not something you would normally do when you get home, speak with the person who would. Make a note, POS defaults, just these 6 categories. We've already spoken about transaction authentication. We've spent some time in sales and returns. All of these are valuable. They're worth the time for you to check those out. The last piece we want to get to is more for the IT side, theft, fraud, not only detection, but more of an audit, and that's the login audit report. We had numerous requests early on, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, to say, hey, RQ, we really need your database administrators to tell us when someone logged into a certain workstation at a certain store, at what time, because we know there's fraud going on. We want to be able to pinpoint those small details. And we do, and we created a report that will give you guys just that. It's the login audit report. So it's going to give you all that information. Who was logged into a certain workstation at a certain time, at what location, when was their last login, and another cool part is also which environment did they use. So were they in training? Were they in live? And that's exactly what this report will give you. So the login details, the last login, so it's almost direct footprints of where your people have been. A lot of folks would come to us and say, we terminated a sales rep, but for whatever reason, HR forgot to mark them as terminated. They forgot to change their password. We really just want, for our own peace of mind, to make sure they're not causing problems, causing damage, stealing, obviously. This is the report that you want to use. And then finally, no logins. It shows us exactly who hasn't logged in. So hopefully what we've talked about today are steps you guys can quickly, effectively take if not right now, as soon as you're back home in your stores to detect, prevent fraud, save yourselves a lot of money.